The young man proposed to the protagonist that they end their relationship, leaving her stunned, asking for clarification. The words she heard at the party on Friday's twilight, celebrating the return of the Count of Clermont's second son, shocked her. The man calmly announced that he no longer wanted to be her fiancé and had already expressed everything he needed to say. The protagonist, bewildered by this revelation, couldn't comprehend what had happened to their engagement. Despite her confusion, he coldly informed her that he no longer loved her. At that moment, a girl named Adelaide Grand approached him and questioned why he hadn't revealed the truth about their love for each other to his ex-fiancée. Ellis, observing the interaction, was astonished and struggled to understand their conversation. However, Adelaide Grand, with a smug smile, apologized to the protagonist for the situation and confessed her love for François. She then wickedly pondered whether Ellis would be happy for them. Ellis questioned the audacity of the girl's desire to hear words of joy from her. Filled with anger, the protagonist approached François and struck him so forcefully that he began to cry. In that moment, François bowed his head. Adelaide Grand, in her astonishment, rushed towards François and, while looking at Ellis, questioned her intentions. However, she merely looked disdainfully at the two and declared that now that she knew about their affair, she would end her engagement. She informed François that they were no longer together and, with a deadly expression, reminded him that he should have personally communicated the news to the Marquis. She also urged him not to forget to mention the reason for their breakup. And soon returned with her friends. They eagerly looked at her, curious as to why she had come back alone and where Mr. François was. It turned out that they had gone to the garden together, but Ellis had just informed the girls that she had ended her engagement. They asked about Ellis' well-being, as she must have been devastated by the news. Eventually, they realized that there was no point in being sad and decided to support their friend. One of the girls shared that she had experienced similar moments in her own life and knew that alcohol was often a comforting companion in such situations. Another girl happily agreed, suggesting that they should get drunk to fill the emptiness in their hearts. They raised their glasses and toasted to Ellis's liberation from her unnecessary marital ties. However, their excitement was interrupted when one of the girls noticed Mr. Teodoro Clermont in the crowd. She wondered why he had appeared, as it had been a long time since he had attended such receptions. The protagonist's friend recalled an interesting fact. Theodore Clermont had studied at the same military academy as Ellis. Curious, she asked Ellis about her memories of the young man during their academy days. Rumors had circulated about Theodore Clermont's wild nature in his youth, comparing him to a wild dog. The room fell silent with anticipation as they awaited Ellis's response. Suddenly, everyone's attention shifted as Adelaide Grand entered the room with François. The friends of the protagonist looked around with disapproval. Ellis discovered that the man he had trusted turned out to be a despicable individual. Despite her suspicions, Ellis chose to ignore them and instead focused on his own feelings of sadness. She had often seen François with Adelaide, and every time she did, he couldn't help but be captivated by her beauty. Adelaide would wear a stunning silk dress adorned with bright bows and ruffles. Ellis wondered if Adelaide's close relationship with François, whom she considered both her fiancé and best friend, caused her to turn a blind eye to the unfolding situation. She berated herself for not realizing the truth sooner and blamed her own foolishness for clinging onto François, unable to let him go. This reminded Ellis of their initial encounter, where he had been infatuated with her. Suddenly, François approached Ellis, bowed, greeted her, and congratulated her on her safe return. He reached out to take her hand and kiss it, but she nervously pointed out that her hands were covered in dust. François reassured her that it was of no concern and expressed his pleasure in meeting such an incredible person. Reflecting on this moment, Ellis admitted to herself that François' charming smile had made her feel special. However, in the next moment, she found herself unable to bear his company any longer. Overwhelmed with emotions, Ellis rushed out into the street, leaving her bewildered friends behind. She regretted agreeing to marry François, realizing that she would have never done so if she had known how everything would unfold. Even though she was aware that people's hearts could change, she couldn't fathom that François could commit such a terrible act. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she wished she could turn back time to the day she fell in love with him. Ellis collapsed to the ground in exhaustion and continued to sob. It made her realize that if she had the chance to change things, she would never have fallen in love with that young man. She pleaded with God for mercy and to bring her back to that day. If God had even the slightest sympathy for her, he could grant her wish. As she lost consciousness, her final thoughts were a desperate plea to God. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in a room, completely restrained. The speaker addressed her by name and informed her that she would be executed due to her sin. Confused and agitated, she struggled to comprehend what he was talking about and what she had done wrong. In her last moments, she screamed that she didn't want to die. In reality, she also screamed, but a concerned voice reassured her and calmed her down. The voice reminded her that she was safe now and shouldn't be afraid. As she slowly opened her eyes after the dream, the protagonist recognized the familiar voice and jumped up startled from her seat. When she saw the man in front of her, she wondered why she was in a room with him for the first time. She carefully observed Theodore and began to fear that her nightmare had become a reality. She had no idea how she had ended up in the same room as that wild man called Theodore Clermont. She recollected that Theodore Clermont was the second son of the esteemed knight, Count of Clermont. Additionally, it was discovered that both she and the young man had attended the same military academy. Although she had initially felt deeply devastated by this news, her current state of mind was one of immense relief upon realizing that she was still fully clothed. Consequently, she questioned Theodore Clermont about the events that had transpired. In response, he simply smiled and inquired if she had no recollection of anything. He explained that he had discovered her inebriated and unconscious in the garden, and had subsequently brought her to his room. The protagonist, feeling somewhat awkward, pondered whether he had truly saved her. However, as the memories of the previous day flooded back, she was overcome with shock and a profound sense of shame for her behavior. It became evident that she should not have consumed such copious amounts of alcohol, as the potential consequences of being seen in such a state by others would have resulted in scandalous rumors. Yet, she couldn't help but wonder if anyone other than Theodore had attempted to assist her. It then dawned on her that they had spent a considerable amount of time together at the military academy. However, she was certain that they had never been particularly close, and she recalled his reputation as a wild and unpredictable individual during the knighting ceremony. Thus, after carefully observing him, she questioned the motive behind his rescue. Yet, all he did was smile in response. The protagonist's mind was filled with numerous thoughts, prompting her to ponder the reason behind this sudden change in the young man's behavior. She questioned whether something had occurred between them that she was unable to recall. However, he then directed his gaze towards her with a sudden intensity and advised her to exercise caution in the future, as any lack thereof would bring disgrace upon her. Moving closer, he pressed the young woman against the wall and disclosed that despite nothing occurring between them, he had restrained himself the previous night for such a prolonged period that a single night would not alter their situation. Perplexed, the protagonist pondered why Theodore Clermont had suddenly adopted such behavior, considering that he had only saved her moments before. However, the man approached and whispered in her ear, expressing his indecent desires towards her lover. Swiftly reacting, she pushed him away and fled. Although she was deeply disturbed and failed to comprehend the man's actions, she believed that she had encountered enough fools in her lifetime. Consequently, the girl hurriedly made her way to her family's residence, where the excited maid inquired about her whereabouts during the night. Realizing that she must conceal the fact that she had spent the night in the same room as Theodore, particularly following their broken engagement, Louise awkwardly smiled to mask her embarrassment and excitement. She assured the woman that nothing significant had occurred and suggested that she prepare for work promptly. Finally, the enthusiastic women reached a consensus and assisted the young girl in arranging her hair. With a smile, they conveyed to her that the protagonist appeared exceptionally regal on that day, surpassing any other knight in the entire empire. Engrossed in her thoughts, the girl gazed at her reflection in the mirror and proclaimed herself as a knight of the empire, the deputy commander of the knights, and the heiress of a revered lineage that had always safeguarded the royal family. Reflecting on the recent events, she confided in her nurse that she could not harbor eternal regrets. She acknowledged that it would take time to fully comprehend the occurrences of the previous dawn, but presently, it held no significance. As time passed, the girl immersed herself in rigorous training on the practice field, diligently honing her skills. Observing her, a young man named Morris approached her with laughter, offering her a towel and complimenting her on her consistently sharp sword. He wished her a good morning. The protagonist immediately recognized him as the son of her mother's closest aide, and they had grown up together as siblings. Morris smiled at her and playfully referred to her as a countess in her prime years. Graciously accepting the towel, she humbly acknowledged his words, stating that it was an exaggeration to compare her to her mother. Just then, an exuberant girl approached the young duo, greeting both Morris and the protagonist. She excitedly informed them that everyone had realized their early arrival that day. However, she also noticed that Louis Debelgueux appeared much better than expected, despite rumors of her drunkenness at the previous night's party and her readiness to cause chaos. However, after exchanging a subtle wink with the protagonist, she expressed her belief that her nights were unparalleled, even when it came to indulging in alcohol. This, she claimed, was the green light. As the protagonist gazed at her, an immediate realization dawned upon him. Despite hailing from the town of Llano, this girl was renowned among the knights for her exceptional ability to gather information. However, his heart sank when he learned that news of their broken engagement had reached even Lady Lucy, also known as Lady the Green, who was not present at the party. Nevertheless, the protagonist managed to draw her attention away from her thoughts, and the girl calmly shared her belief that challenging times lay ahead for Eli. Regardless of the commander's favor towards him, the burden had become overwhelming. It was at this moment that Morris intervened, forcefully stepping on her foot to silence her once and for all. The protagonist, observing this unhappily, questioned Morris about the desperation he seemed so eager to conceal. However, Morris waved his hands frantically, insisting that he truly knew nothing. The protagonist, consumed by anger at such a blatant lie, unsheathed her sword, its malevolent gleam reflecting in the sunlight, and sternly demanded that Mr. Morris promptly reconsider his behavior and disclose everything he was hiding. Reluctantly, the agitated young man revealed that Lady the Green's propensity for gossip had always caused trouble. He suggested that their first course of action should be to visit the study. After carefully examining the protagonist's report, he emphasized that her primary duty was to participate in the upcoming battle and could not afford to neglect the paperwork. A sense of unease crept over her, leading her to believe that something was amiss. However, upon entering her office, she was greeted by an unexpected tranquility, yet her mind brimmed with exhilarating thoughts. The office, which she had anticipated to be cluttered with an overwhelming amount of paperwork, was surprisingly serene. Now, the surroundings appeared impeccably clean, prompting her to enter with excitement and inspect everything. However, inside the room, a young man called out her name. The man inquired about his identity. Unfortunately, the man simply reiterated that, as previously mentioned, they were about to meet. Following this, Theodore Clermont knelt down, kissed the palm of his hand, and revealed that he had been appointed as the deputy vice commander of the Knights on the previous Friday. He introduced himself as Tay and expressed his honor in working alongside the lady. The girl, utterly shocked, struggled to find appropriate words to respond to the situation. Eventually, she hastily left the office. Bursting into the commander's office, she eagerly questioned what had happened to her new assistant. In a relaxed manner, the commander wiped down an expensive bottle of alcohol and informed her that he was now the deputy commander and could not be left without an assistant. The girl rushed towards the table, placing her hands on it, and exclaimed that the commander had appointed Theodore without consulting her. She argued that she should have had the right to choose her own assistant and that she would never have chosen such an unpredictable young man. Unfazed by her outburst, the commander continued his monotonous work of sifting through the alcohol and sympathized with Eloise's feelings. He explained that this appointment signified the unwavering belief in the protagonist's capabilities. Astonished, she looked at the commander and inquired about his statement. With a smile, the commander clarified that regardless of Theodore Clermont's past, he was still a member of the imperial family. He further stated that having someone like Tay as an assistant would be beneficial, but warned that if the girl made a single mistake, consequences would follow. The possibility of her execution seemed highly likely. Upon hearing this news, she let out a sigh of dismay, finding it difficult to believe. She pleaded with the commander to reconsider his decision, but he calmly informed her that it was too late as the process had already commenced. It was then that she noticed an extensive collection of the finest wines from her empire, a rare vintage produced exclusively in a specific region. This struck her as peculiar, considering the commander's usual preference for cheap alcohol. As he prepared to leave the office, she wished him luck and encouraged him to continue working diligently.